set capital M, there are 10 vertices to the graph. And adjacency is defined as two vertices S and T are adjacent if they are disjoint. So that the vertex 1, 2 will be adjacent to 3, 4, 3, 5, and 4, 5. And this is applicable to any two-element set or any vertex. So every vertex is adjacent with 3 vertices, so that the graph is 3 regular. And this is a another definition of the Peterson graph. The classical definition is you take a pentagon, outside pentagon, and inside you take a pentagram and join the corresponding vertices. Or you take a C5 and inside a C5 complement and join the corresponding vertices. So that is a classical definition of the Peterson graph. And this is another definition. The vertex set of Peterson graph consists of all two-element subsets of this 5-element set, and two vertices S and T are adjacent if their intersection is empty or if they have no common digits. Now, in the first class, we see that the ith entry of A square, the ith entry of A square is the total number of Vi, Vj walks of length 2. Now we are going to count the number of St walks of length 2. So suppose S and T are adjacent. If S and T are adjacent, then the representation of S and T as two-element sets are disjoint. So for example, if this is 1, 2 and this is then 3, 4, then there cannot exist a vertex, say R, which is adjacent to both this S and T, because there are no symbols. So we have already used 4 symbols, and there are only 5 symbols, and there is no 2 disjoint symbols remains. So there is no R such that there is an SRT path of length 2 or SRT walk of length 2 or an ST walk of length 2. So the STth entry of A square is 0 if S adjacent to T. On the other hand, when S adjacent to T, the STth entry of A is equal to 1. Now, if S and T are not adjacent, that means S and T has a common entry, common member in the two-element set, say 1, 2 and 2, 3. Then there exists 4, 5, so that S is adjacent to this R and T is adjacent to R, so that there is only one SRT walk of length 2. So this is equal to 1 if S not adjacent to T. So we have counted the number of ST walks of length 2, and the Sth entry of A square, that we also noticed that the Sth entry of A square is the total number of SS walks of length 2, and SS walks of length 2 is the degree of S. That is a degree of S, and that is 3. So we have A square plus A. See, whenever there is a 0 in A square, the corresponding entry in A is 1. And whenever there is an entry 0 in A square, sorry, 1 in A square, the corresponding entry in A is 0. Because in A square, an entry 1 appear if S not adjacent to T. And if S not adjacent to T, then the corresponding entry in A is 0. So A square plus A. Also the diagonal entries are 3. Because the diagonal entries are the Sth entry of A square. So A square plus A gives us J plus 2i, where J is the all one matrix. So that the diagonal entry of this side is 1 plus 2, 3, and all others are 1, and the corresponding entry sum in A square plus A is always 1. Whenever there is a 0 here in A square, the corresponding entry in A is 1, and vice versa. So A square plus A is equal to J plus 2i. We already know that 3 is an eigenvalue by Perron-Frobenius theorem for a regular graph, because this Petersen graph is regular. And from this equation, and using Hoffman polynomial theorem, if lambda is any other eigenvalue, then lambda satisfies lambda square plus lambda is equal to, see, for any other eigenvalue, this J, which is a polynomial in A, by Hoffman polynomial theorem vanishes, equal to 0. So this is equal to 2. So for any eigenvalue lambda of Petersen graph, lambda square plus lambda minus 2 equal to 0. So we have lambda square plus lambda minus 2 equal to 0. So this implies lambda plus 1 into this lambda minus 1 into lambda plus 2 equal to 0. So this is the factorization of lambda square plus lambda minus 2 equal to 0. Therefore, lambda equal to 1 and lambda equal to minus 2 are the other two eigenvalues of the Petersen graph. And we know that the Petersen graph has 10 vertices. The regularity 3 is an eigenvalue, and by Perron-Frobenius theorem, this 3 is a simple eigenvalue, so multiplicity of 3 is 1. If A is the multiplicity of lambda equal to 1 and B is the multiplicity of lambda equal to minus 2, then A plus B is equal to 9. Because there are 10 eigenvalues, of which the 3 becomes an eigenvalue with multiplicity 1. Therefore, the sum of multiplicities of the remaining eigenvalues is equal to 9. And also we know that the sum of the eigenvalues is 0. Sigma lambda I equal to 0. Therefore, 3 plus A plus minus 2B equal to 0. So that gives another equation, A plus minus 2B is equal to minus 3. So from this equation, we have 3B equal to 12, B equal to 4. If B is equal to 4, A is equal to 5. So the spectrum of the Petersen graph, this is the spectrum of the Petersen graph is 3 with the multiplicity 1, 1 with the multiplicity A is 5, and minus 2 with multiplicity 4. See, why, you may ask, why this computation is relevant or significant or important. This is because in the beginning session itself, as we have already mentioned, that the spectrum of a graph is the eigenvalues of the corresponding adjacency matrix, and adjacency matrix is an n by n square matrix if the graph has n vertices. And here the graph has 10 vertices and the adjacency matrix is a 10 by 10 matrix. And the characteristic polynomial is determinant A minus lambda I. And the expansion of a 10 by 10 determinant or a determinant of order 10 is a tedious process, is not easy. And even though we made it, we expanded at 10 by 10 determinant, we reach at a 10th degree equation. And the solution of a 10th degree equation or a factorization of that 10th degree equation is also not easy. Not saying that it's not easy, may not be easy. So we have to develop some other techniques rather from, instead of this conventional procedure of expanding the determinant and finding and solving the characteristic polynomial, characteristic equation. Apart from that, we have to develop some other techniques using this Hoffman polynomial theorem, Perron-Frobenius theorem, and some other tools which are available to find the spectrum. So this is why I mentioned the computation of the spectra of the Peterson graph. This is one technique without the expansion, without solving an equation, nothing. But instead, we observe the number of ST walks of length 2 in the Peterson graph. So using the number of 2 ST walks of length 2, we reached at an equation so that other eigenvalues of the Peterson graph can be deduced from that. So this technique can be used for feasible possible graphs by counting the number of walks of certain length. Frame an equation in A, and then solve it for the eigenvalues. And this problem actually this Peterson graph is a very famous graph in graph theory. Whatever concept we describe or we study, there is a study of that property or parameter with respect to this Peterson graph. Another area of research in graph theory is the decomposition of graphs. And decomposition of a graph is the writing of the graph as the edge disjoint union of certain graphs. See, the simple definition of the decomposition of a graph is this: a writing of the edge disjoint union of certain graphs. If G can be expressed as the edge disjoint union of certain graphs, then we say G is decomposed into those graphs. Now you consider K10, the complete graph on 10 vertices. The complete graph on 10 vertices is a non-regular graph, and it has 45 edges. Since it is non-regular, sum of degrees is 90, so half the number of edges is 45. And on the other hand, the Peterson graph is triregular, and it has 15 edges. So this is a question of importance in decomposition of graphs. So we expect that this non-regular graph with the 45 edges can be decomposed into 3 copies of these triregular 15 edges graph, because their union forms 45 edges, and the 3 copies will give rise to the non-regularity of K10. So is that possible? Is the decomposition of K10 into 3 Peterson graph is possible? So that is a question of interest while to those people who study decomposition. So there are several techniques in the decomposition theory to show that whether this is possible or not, but we use here the spectrum of the Peterson graph to show that we cannot decompose K10 into 3 copies of Peterson graph. Actually, this is K10, and we can find 2 copies of the Peterson graph inside K10. The red is the conventional drawing of the Peterson graph. So the pentagon outside, and inside the pentagram joining corresponding vertices. That is a conventional drawing of the Peterson graph. 1 copy of Peterson graph is there, and blue is another copy of the Peterson graph. And the question is whether the black also forms a copy of the Peterson graph. And interestingly, we can see we use very simple technique in spectral graph theory to show that this decomposition is not possible. So assume that this Peterson graph can be decomposed into 3 copies of the Peterson graph. The K10 can be decomposed into 3 copies of the Peterson graph. So we have already noticed that the spectrum of the Peterson graph is 3 with multiplicity 1, 1 with multiplicity 5, and -2 with multiplicity 4. And the spectrum of K10 is 9 with multiplicity 1 and -1 with multiplicity 9. That is the spectrum of the complete graph. So if possible, assume that K10 can be decomposed into 3 copies of the Peterson graph. So that the adjacency matrix of K10 is the adjacency matrix of three copies, sum of the adjacency matrix of the three Peterson graph. So let it be B plus C plus D, where B, C, and D are the adjacency matrices of the Peterson graphs. So A is equal to B plus C plus D. Now we know that this K10 is non-regular. And by Perron-Frobenius theorem, we know that the all one vector 1 is an eigenvector corresponding to 9 for K10. And all other eigenvectors or all other 9 vectors in the basis of R10 are orthogonal to this one. And you consider one copy of Peterson graph. Peterson graph has 1 as an eigenvalue with multiplicity 5. And we already noticed that this is the algebraic multiplicity of 1. And we already noticed that the algebraic multiplicity of an eigenvalue equals to its geometric multiplicity. That is the number of eigenvectors associated with this 1 are 5, and 5 linearly independent eigenvectors are there, or the eigenspace corresponding to this 1 is 5-dimensional. And another copy of the Peterson graph also has 1 as an eigenvalue, so that there is a 5-dimensional space associated with that eigenvalue. So these two 5-dimensional spaces associated with the two copies of the Peterson graph should have a common vector V. See, otherwise what happens? The two 5-dimensional spaces associated with this one will be linearly independent by the very construction, and that is impossible in a 9-dimensional space. See, every other thing happens in the 9-dimensional space of R10. In R10, the R10 has a basis. See, one vector is the all one vector corresponding to the regularity 9 of K10. And all other eigenvectors are orthogonal to this one, and they lie in R10. They lie in the 9-dimensional subspace of R10. So the eigenvectors corresponding to 1 in one copy of Peterson graph is 5-dimensional, and the eigenspace corresponding to 1 in the second copy of Peterson graph is also 5-dimensional, and these two 5-dimensional spaces must have a common vector, otherwise that cannot happen in a 9-dimensional space. So there is a V which corresponds to the eigenvalue 1 for this B and C, so that BV equal to CV equal to V. BV is equal to 1V, CV is equal to 1V. Now we apply this V to both sides. We know that the adjacency matrix of K10, has its diagonal entries zeros, and all other entries equal to 1, because every vertex is adjacent to any other vertex. So adjacency matrix of K10 is J minus I. So J minus I of B is equal to B plus C plus D of V. And you operate with V. V is in the 5-dimensional space corresponding to the eigenvalue 1, which lies then in the 9-dimensional subspace of R10. So this is V is orthogonal to the all one vector. Therefore, JV equal to 0. So this implies minus V, minus I into V is minus V, that is equal to BV plus CV plus DV. Therefore, DV is equal to minus 3V. This V and V goes to the left hand side. DV is equal to minus 3V, but this is impossible, because this then shows that D, that is the adjacency matrix of the Peterson graph, DV is equal to minus 3V. That implies minus 3 belongs to the spectrum of the Peterson graph, and that is impossible, because there is no entry, no eigenvalue which is equal to minus 3 in Peterson graph. So this decomposition is not possible. Therefore, K10 cannot be decomposed into 3 copies of Peterson graph as we expected. And similar techniques can be used to other decomposition problems to prove the existence or non-existence of decomposition of graphs. So this is a place where spectral graph theory and algebraic graph theory, other than this spectral part of graph theory, comes in hand, so that techniques in spectral graph theory can be used to prove results in other areas of graph theory. And in a similar way, we can find the spectrum of a strongly regular graph. So I will just sketch a proof, a line of proof. So what do you mean by a strongly regular graph? A strongly regular graph with n vertices, k regular, and 2 adjacent vertices have lambda common neighbors, and every 2 non-adjacent vertices have mu common neighbors. Such a graph which is k regular, in which every 2 adjacent vertices have lambda common neighbors, and every 2 non-adjacent vertices have mu common neighbors, is known as a strongly regular graph, and that is denoted that is referred as a graph with parameters n, k, lambda, mu. See, in this order, n is the number of vertices, this k is the regularity, lambda is the number of common neighbors to adjacent vertices, and mu is the number of common neighbors to non-adjacent vertices. See, suppose A be the adjacency matrix of a strongly regular graph. And we know that the ith entry of A square is the degree of the vertex Vi, and that is k. And if Vi adjacent to Vj, if Vi is adjacent to Vj, then by the definition of the strongly regular graph, there are lambda common neighbors. Lambda common neighbors. Therefore, there are lambda Vi Vj walks of length 2. So the ijth entry of A square is lambda if Vi adjacent to Vj. And if Vi and Vj are not adjacent, then they have mu common neighbors. So if Vi and Vj are not adjacent, then there are mu Vi Vj walks of length 2. So combining all these, we have A square. The entries of A square is now calculated. The ith entry is k, ijth entry is lambda if Vi and Vj are adjacent, and ijth entry is mu if Vi and Vj are not adjacent. So A square can be written as ki. The diagonal entries are k because ith entries are k. And if Vi and Vj are adjacent, the corresponding entry is lambda. And if Vi and Vj are adjacent, the corresponding entry in A is 1. So this is lambda A. If Vi and Vj are not adjacent, then the corresponding entry is 0. So that the adjacency matrix of its complement is J minus I minus A. So this. So the adjacency matrix of the strongly regular graph satisfies this condition. A square plus ki, A square is equal to ki plus lambda A plus mu into J minus I minus A. Then a technique we used in case of Peterson graph can be applied here also to find the eigenvalues of the strongly regular graph. Okay. Now, this is one example of the strongly regular graph, the famous Srigandhe graph. Our C5 is a strongly regular graph. Peterson graph is a particular strongly regular graph. C5 is 5 to 0 C5 1. C5 is the strongly regular graph with parameters 5 to 0 1. 5 vertices, 2 regular. Adjacent vertices have no common neighbors, and non-adjacent vertices have one common neighbor. This is C5. You can see that adjacent vertices do not have a common neighbor because there are no triangles, and the non-adjacent vertices have exactly one common neighbor. So this is a strongly regular graph, and Peterson graph is also strongly regular, and so on. So the computation of spectrum of strongly regular graph also can be made without expanding the adjacency matrix, solving the characteristic polynomial, and so on. Now, we pass on to the Rayleigh quotient. The Rayleigh quotient can be used to find the estimates of eigenvalues. See, the actual computation of eigenvalues, actual computation of the spectrum of graphs may not be possible if the graph do not took a nice form. See, we have here, we discussed the spectrum of Peterson graph and strongly regular graph, and regular graph and complements of regular graphs, bipartite graphs are all because of the nice structure of the graph. And if the graph do not have a nice such form, the computation of exact eigenvalues may not be possible, may be difficult. We cannot say that it is not possible, because in the event of so many softwares, many computational softwares, we can find the spectrum, but it may not be easy. In such circumstances, there are some other techniques to find the estimates of eigenvalues, and one of the such techniques abundantly used is this Rayleigh quotient. So suppose A be a symmetric matrix and X be an n by 1 column vector in Rn. Then the Rayleigh quotient of X with respect to A is defined as the scalar X transpose Ax by X transpose X. See, this is actually a scalar because X is an n by 1 column vector. So X transpose is 1 by n, A is n by n, and X is n by 1. So that this is 1 by 1. This is a scalar. And X transpose X is 1 by n, and X is n by 1. So that this is also a 1 by 1, means a scalar. So this is a scalar. And if X not equal to 0, this definition is valid. X transpose X is never 0 if X not equal to 0. And this number, this is what is known as the Rayleigh quotient. And our immediate observation is, lambda is an eigenvalue of A with an eigenvector X, if and only if the corresponding Rayleigh quotient Rx coincide with this lambda. Lambda is an eigenvalue of A with an eigenvector X. See, if lambda is an eigenvalue of A with an eigenvector X, we readily have Ax is equal to lambda X. Then if you multiply both sides with X transpose. So lambda is an eigenvalue. Lambda is an eigenvalue of A with eigenvector X, if and only if Ax is equal to lambda X. So this is if and only if X transpose Ax is equal to X transpose lambda X. Lambda is a scalar, so this is lambda X transpose X. And we can see that X transpose X is a scalar, X transpose X is a scalar. So this is if and only if lambda is equal to X transpose X divided by X transpose X. And this is the Rayleigh quotient of X with respect to A. So if X is an eigenvector corresponding to lambda, then the corresponding Rayleigh quotient coincide with the eigenvalue lambda. And this is what is known as the Rayleigh principle. If A is an adjacency matrix of a graph with eigenvalues lambda 1 greater than or equal to lambda 2 greater than or equal to etc. greater than or equal to lambda n. See, this ordering is possible because we already noticed in the first session that the adjacency matrix of G is symmetric, and symmetric matrix have its eigenvalues real. So this ordering of eigenvalues is possible, and let lambda 1 be the largest eigenvalue and lambda n be the smallest eigenvalue. So that lambda 1 greater than or equal to lambda 2 greater than or equal to etc. lambda n. Then you find all Rayleigh quotients of X's members of Rn with respect to A. Then among these, the maximum or more apt word is supremum. The supremum of all such Rayleigh quotients will be lambda 1. So the greatest eigenvalue is the supremum of all Rayleigh quotients. And lambda n, that is the minimum of or infimum of all, infimum among all Rayleigh quotients. This is the famous Rayleigh principle. So that we can find some estimates of lambda. If we choose some particular x, then we can say that since lambda 1 is a supremum, we can say that lambda 1 is greater than or equal to the Rayleigh quotient of that. So if we choose this x wisely, we can find some estimates for the largest eigenvalue. So choosing this suitable x is part of research. So this is one research problem, finding estimates of the largest eigenvalue and find the estimates of the smallest eigenvalue. So we prove this. So we have a very simple proof for this Rayleigh principle. See, there are more than some 50, 60 different proofs for the Rayleigh principles. Okay. So we will prove this, and similarly, this second follows. See, how can we show that? See, suppose X be an eigenvector corresponding to the largest eigenvalue lambda or lambda 1. Suppose X, okay, we use V. Suppose V be the eigenvector corresponding to lambda. We write lambda instead of lambda 1. So suppose V be the eigenvector corresponding to lambda, where lambda means lambda 1, the greatest eigenvalue. Then we have already noticed that the Rayleigh quotient corresponding to this V is equal to lambda. The Rayleigh quotient corresponding to this V. So the Rayleigh quotient corresponding to one such particular vector, and since this is an eigenvector, V not equal to 0, and V belongs to Rn. So the Rayleigh quotient of one vector is equal to lambda, and the maximum among all such Rayleigh quotients will be then definitely greater than or equal to lambda. We have that observation. I think that is clear. The Rayleigh quotient of one non-zero vector equal to lambda, but we are finding the supremum of all such Rayleigh quotients. So the supremum of all such Rayleigh quotients will be greater than or equal to lambda. And on the other hand, in the first session, we observed that the first session we observed that Rn has an orthogonal basis consisting of eigenvectors of A corresponding to the different eigenvalues. And since it has an orthogonal basis, by Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process, we can find an orthonormal basis for Rn. An orthonormal basis for Rn consisting of the eigenvectors of corresponding to this lambda 1, lambda 2, etc., lambda n. So suppose this orthonormal basis be v1, v2, etc., vn or Rn. That means vi transpose vj equal to 0 if I not equal to j, because they are orthonormal and orthogonal. And since they are orthonormal, vi transpose vi is equal to 1. We have normalized these orthogonal eigenvectors. Therefore, any x belongs to Rn can be written as, say, x is equal to some alpha 1 v1 plus alpha 2 v2 plus etc. plus alpha n vn. For this alpha I belongs to R. So that's a linear combination. So that's a very elementary linear algebra. Any x belongs to Rn can be expressed as a linear combination of the basis elements. Therefore, x transpose x is equal to alpha 1 v1 transpose plus alpha 2 v2 transpose plus etc. plus alpha n vn transpose into alpha 1 v1 plus etc. plus alpha n vn. And we multiply this alpha 1 v1 transpose alpha 1 v1, that is alpha 1 square v1 transpose v1 transpose v1 is equal to 1 plus alpha 1 v1 transpose into alpha 2, this term is alpha 2 v2, v1 transpose into v2, that is 0 because vi's are orthogonal. So all other terms are zeros, and the next contribution comes from alpha 2 v2 transpose alpha 2 v2. So this is alpha 2 square plus etc. plus alpha n square. And now we are going to compute x transpose ax. So what is ax first? Ax is a of a into a of alpha 1 v1, a into alpha 1 v1 plus etc. plus alpha n vn. See, we know that a is a linear operator when we regard it as a linear operator from Rn to Rn. So using linearity of a, this can be written as alpha 1 a v1 plus etc. plus alpha n a vn. But we know that vi's are eigenvectors of a corresponding to the eigenvalues lambda I. vi's are eigenvectors corresponding to lambda i's. So this can be written as alpha 1 lambda 1 plus etc. plus alpha n lambda n. Sorry, alpha a v1 is equal to lambda 1 v1, etc. a vn is equal to lambda n vn. Clear? So we use this. Keep this in mind. X transpose x is equal to alpha 1 square plus etc. plus alpha n square. X transpose ax is equal to alpha 1 lambda 1 v1 plus etc. plus alpha n lambda n vn. Right, once again here x transpose x is equal to alpha 1 square plus etc. plus alpha n square. Ax is equal to alpha 1 lambda 1 v1 plus etc. plus alpha n lambda n vn. Therefore, x transpose x transpose is alpha 1 v1 transpose plus etc. plus alpha n vn transpose into alpha 1 lambda 1 v1 plus etc. plus alpha n lambda n vn. Now this is equal to, say, as in the earlier case, we have lambda alpha 1 square lambda 1 plus alpha 2 square lambda 2 plus etc. plus alpha n square lambda n. Therefore, x transpose x by x transpose x. So this is the Rayleigh quotient of x is equal to alpha 1 square lambda 1 plus alpha 2 square lambda 2 plus etc. plus alpha n square lambda n divided by alpha 1 square plus alpha 2 square plus etc. plus alpha n square. And now we know that lambda 1 is the largest eigenvalue. See, if you replace this lambda 1, lambda 2, etc. lambda n by lambda 1, then this side is less than or equal to alpha 1 square lambda 1 plus alpha 2 square lambda 1 plus etc. plus alpha n square lambda 1 by alpha 1 square plus alpha 2 square plus etc. plus alpha n square. And this is equal to lambda 1. So you take any x, then the Rayleigh quotient Rx is less than or equal to lambda 1. Therefore, the supremum of the Rayleigh quotient is also less than or equal to lambda 1. We call it as 2. We have already noticed that supremum of Rayleigh quotient is greater than or equal to lambda 1. Combining these two, supremum of the Rayleigh quotient is the largest eigenvalue lambda 1. Supremum of the Rayleigh quotients x not equal to 0 belongs to Rn is the Rayleigh quotient. In a similar way, we can show that the infimum of these Rayleigh quotients is the least smallest eigenvalue lambda n. This result can be further modified to find the estimates of the second largest eigenvalue, third largest eigenvalue, and so on. Because we took an x in the span of v1, v2, v3, etc. vn. We took x in the span of v1, v2, v3, etc. vn, where v1, v2, v3, etc. vn are in that order are the eigenvectors of the eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, etc. lambda n. Then we noticed that, then we proved that lambda 1 is the supremum of the Rayleigh quotients, where x belongs to the span of v1, v2, etc. vn, and lambda n is the infimum or the minimum of the Rayleigh quotients. X belongs to the span of v1, v2, etc. vn. See, instead of this, if you take an x from the span of v1, v2, etc. vk, then you can see that this lambda k corresponding to vk is the minimum, as lambda n is the infimum. Lambda k is the infimum of the Rayleigh quotients x belongs to u. And if x is in the span of vk, v3, etc. vn, then lambda k is the maximum. And taking the span is that requires some mathematics. And actually, that brings the research there. How to find the estimates of other eigenvalues, suitably choosing eigenvectors in the span of some eigenvectors. We find some x in the span of some eigenvectors and then use this result to find the estimates for lambda k, because lambda k is then, since this is minimum, lambda k is less than or equal to the Rayleigh quotients there, so that an estimate for the kth eigenvalue can be obtained if we take this x in the span of certain eigenvectors. And combining these two, we have the Coren-Fisher theorem. See, this is a simple application of what we have just described. The maximum among minimum of these Rayleigh quotients will be equal to the minimum among maximum of these type Rayleigh quotients. Because by considering x belongs to two different spaces, the previous also we obtained that if x belongs to the span of this, lambda k is the minimum, and if x belongs to the span of this, then lambda k is the maximum. So minimum and maximum of something, some eigenvectors, eigenvalues coincide, and this is the generalization of this is the Coren-Fisher theorem. And this Rayleigh quotient can be applied to find the estimates of the eigenvalues. See, one of the simple application and the one of the fundamental results is this. See, research have been advanced from this point to a greater extent. So now to find the estimates for the largest eigenvalue, we need to use some x wisely. And here you will see how Rayleigh quotient can be applied, Rayleigh principle can be applied here to find this. So we have A is the adjacency matrix of a graph, and suppose lambda be the greatest eigenvalue, lambda is the supremum of the Rayleigh quotients. So lambda will be greater than or equal to Rx, the Rayleigh quotient of x, for any non-zero x. So we choose x is equal to the all one vector. We choose x as the all one vector. So what is the Rayleigh quotient of x? Rayleigh quotient of x is x transpose a x by x transpose x. And when we multiply a with this column vector, what we are getting is a column vector. First row multiplied with this. So this is the first row sum, R1. First row sum. And second row of A multiplied with this one, that gives you second row, etc. And the last we get the nth row sum divided by x transpose x, 1 into 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, etc. multiplied by this one, you get n. And this is equal to when this row vector is multiplied with this column vector, that gives R1 plus R2 plus etc. plus Rn. R1 plus R2 plus etc. plus Rn by n. We know that the row corresponding to Vi, see, we have, when we define the adjacency matrix, we observed that the ith row corresponding to Vi contains that much number of ones to which this Vi adjacent with. So the number of ones in the row corresponding to Vi is the number of vertices to which this Vi is adjacent. So R1 is the degree of V1, R2 is the degree of V2. So this is the sum of degrees by n. And from the first theorem in graph theory, we have sum of degrees of vertices is twice the number of edges, and this is 2m by n. So therefore lambda greater than or equal to 2m by n. So that was the first part of the inequality. First part of the inequality was, see, 2m lambda greater than or equal to 2m by n. And the second part is free from Rayleigh principle, and for the sakeness of the completion, let me prove lambda less than or equal to delta. So how can we prove that? See, let V be an eigenvector corresponding to lambda. V be an eigenvector corresponding to lambda. So AV is equal to lambda V, and V is equal to, suppose it be x1, x2, etc., xi. And suppose xi be the largest entry in V. Now you expand along the ith row. AV is equal to lambda V. We expand it along the ith row. So what we get is the ith row is AI1 x1 plus AI2 x2 plus etc. plus AIN xn equal to lambda xi. Therefore, lambda is equal to AI1 x1 plus AI2 x2 plus etc. plus AIN xn divided by xi. So the contribution in the numerator comes from only those Aij's where Vi adjacent to Vj. So this is sigma Vi adjacent to Vj Aij xj divided by xi. So how many Vj's are adjacent to Vi? That is, degree of Vi Vj's are adjacent to Vi, and there are only degree of Vi terms in the numerator, and this is equal to sigma Vi adjacent to Vj Aij xj by xi. See, xi is the largest entry, so these terms are less than or equal to 1. This is already 1. So if we replace this term by 1, then this is less than or equal to sigma Vi adjacent to Vj. Aij's are 1 there and 1. And how many ones appear? That is degree of Vi. And this is true for any such i's. So this is less than or equal, and degree of Vi is less than or equal to lambda, the largest degree. So lambda less than or equal to delta. So these are estimates of the eigenvalues. The eigenvalue cannot exceed the largest degree. See, a problem of research, an interest in research is characterization of those graphs with largest degree as eigenvalue. And that question can be answered here itself. And this equality happens. This lambda equal to delta happens if and only if the graph is regular. So that is a characterization. Characterization of a graph whose eigenvalue coincide with delta. If the graph has its largest degree as an eigenvalue, then the graph should necessarily irregular. This that immediately follows, because equality happens if and only if xj by xi is equal to 1 for all j. Equality happens if this xj by xi equal to 1 for all j, means xj equal to xi for all j adjacent to I. Therefore, the entries in V are all xi's corresponding to the vertices adjacent to Vi. Now you apply the same argument by taking a vertex adjacent to Vi. Then we can see that for those vertices adjacent to that particular vertex, all entries is equal to xi. So eventually we get V as a vector, all whose entries are xi's. So that this is equal to xi into the all one vector. So that the eigenspace corresponding to V is one dimensional, because any other eigenvector is a scalar multiple of the all one vector, and the all one vector is an eigenvector corresponding to the regularity of A. So if all one vector is an eigenvector of A, then this graph, this A is regular, because each row sums to a constant. Otherwise, one cannot be an eigenvector. Therefore, each row of capital A has constant row sum, so that capital A is regular. And this is one characterization using Rayleigh principle. Now, this is another estimate for the largest eigenvalue. If G is a graph with a diameter D and lambda the maximum eigenvalue, then lambda is greater than or equal to n minus 1 raised to 1 by D. See, that we will prove after discussing some more things. And if you do not find time for proving this, you see that there are some graphs attaining this equality. And equality holds if and only if the graphs, there are certain graphs, for complete graphs, this equality holds. Because for complete graph, diameter is 1. And the largest eigenvalue is n minus 1. So n minus 1 raised to 1 by D is n minus 1 itself. For Petersen graph, this equality holds. Lambda is the maximum eigenvalue. For the Petersen graph, the maximum eigenvalue is 3. And n equal to 10. And diameter is 2. So 10 minus 1, 9. 9 raised to 1 by 2, that is 3. And there are another classes of graphs called Moore graphs, for which this bound is best possible. That we will discuss later. Another observation regarding the eigenvalue and eigenvector of a graph. So suppose G be a connected graph with A as an adjacency matrix. If a non-negative vector X, see, these are all elementary basic principles of spectral graph theory. And without this, we cannot explore much detail, or we cannot go into the core part of the spectral aspect of graph theory. That is why I am mentioning these results. See, once you masterize in these results, you can either develop similar results with respect to other graphs, or you can explore the spectrum of a graph to find nice results. So that is why I am mentioning this. Let G be a connected graph with A as an adjacency matrix. If a non-negative vector X is an eigenvector of A, so what do you mean by a non-negative vector? No entry is negative. So all entries are greater than or equal to 0. If a non-negative vector X is an eigenvector with an eigenvalue lambda, then X is strictly positive. Suppose A is the adjacency matrix of a graph, and X is an eigenvector of lambda, where Xi greater than or equal to 0 for all I. Then what we are going to prove is that none of the entries is 0. All entries should be strictly positive. Say a column vector with this property, all Xi greater than 0 is called strictly positive. Xi greater than or equal to 0 is a non-negative vector. If a non-negative vector is an eigenvector, then that vector should be strictly positive. That is easy to show. Assume that sum of some Xi is equal to 0. And we know that Ax is equal to lambda x. And suppose some Xi is equal to 0, then you expand along that row, so that sigma Vi adjacent to Vj, Aij Xj equal to lambda Xi, and lambda Xi equal to 0. See, if we expand along that row, the ith row, the corresponding entry in lambda x is lambda Xi, that is equal to 0. And this is impossible because each Xj is greater than or equal to 0. And Aij's are 1 if Vi adjacent to Vj. So this happens if and only if Xj equal to 0 for all j adjacent to I. So we have Vi, we have the entries corresponding to vertices adjacent to Vi are all zeros. So the adjacency, so the eigenvector will look like something like this: x1, x2, etc. Xi equal to 0, and there are some other 0 entries corresponding to the vertices adjacent to Vi, etc. etc. Then we repeat this argument by taking any other vertex among these xj's, any other vertex among those vj's, and the corresponding entry xj equal to 0, and you expand along that row, we can see that the entries corresponding to the vertices adjacent to vj's are also zeros. And since the graph is connected, eventually we reach at a stage when all entries of this eigenvector equal to 0. That is impossible. Therefore, if a non-negative vector is an eigenvector, then none of the entries can be 0. All entries should be positive, should be strictly greater than 0, so that the vector is strictly positive.
Excuse me, sir.
Okay.
Sir, after certain stage, maybe a repeated exercise, maybe a cycle like xi1, xi2, up to xi. Some components, some kth components may be repeated. No, sir. How can we conclude all xi's are 0?
Yes. See, you suppose one xi equal to 0. Then what happens is Vi is adjacent with certain vertices v1, v2, etc. like that. Then from this equation we get the entries corresponding to these vertices are zeros.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now you take one among these vertices.
Okay.
you take one among these vertices, then this vertex will be adjacent to some other vertices.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then in the next stage, we get the entries corresponding to these vertices are zeros.
Okay.
You repeat this procedure.
Okay, sir.
Now your question is,
Hmm.
I understood your question.
Okay,
Now
sir.
your question is, what happens if this happens in a cyclic way,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
right?
Yes,
Something.
sir.
But then the problem is the graph is connected. If this happens in a cyclic way, then no vertex among this will be adjacent to certain vertices here. See, if any vertex is adjacent to any other vertex, by the same argument, we can show that the entries corresponding to these vertices are also zeros. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So this cannot happen in a cyclic way.
Okay.
Okay. So that this cannot happen like this 0, 0, 0, etc. 0. And this 0 repeats
Yes.
because when we take a vertex from these, the vertices adjacent to that vertex also lies here only, and there are non-zero entries here. That cannot happen, because if that happens, the graph will be disconnected. Right?
Right, sir. Right, sir.
That is why we begin our treatment by taking connected graphs. So everything what we are saying here is applicable to connected graphs. In a connected graph, if a non-negative vector is an eigenvector of a graph, then that vector should all positive entries, strictly positive entries. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Now we are all set to prove the Perrin-Frobenius theorem for a connected graph. In the first class, we proved the Perrin-Frobenius theorem for a very particular class of graphs, regular graphs. And now we are ready to prove the Perrin-Frobenius theorem for connected graphs. Let G be a connected graph with at least two vertices, with A as an adjacency matrix with eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, etc., lambda n. Then we have these observations. The largest eigenvalue lambda 1 has a strictly positive eigenvector, and the eigenvalue lambda 1 is simple. And for any other eigenvalue lambda, we have modulus of lambda less than or equal to lambda 1. So this is actually a very strong result, as we mentioned in case of regular graph also. When you go to find the eigenvalues or the spectrum of a given graph, the eigenvalue lies in the closed interval minus lambda 1, lambda 1. See, there are several other research based upon this. The difference between largest eigenvalue and the smallest eigenvalue, that is what is known as the spectral gaps. So there are research to find spectral gaps of certain classes of graphs. See, this question can be asked to any particular classes of graphs also. Suppose a graph has a property P, then what can be the spectral gap of that? If the graph has a particular property P, what can be the largest eigenvalue lambda 1 of that? And the largest eigenvalue is also known as the spectral radius. So like these type questions can be asked. Okay. How can we prove this? Interestingly, for Perrin-Frobenius theorem also, we had seen more than 70, 80 proofs. And this is one of the most simplest proof for Perrin-Frobenius theorem. See, directly that proof follows directly with the application of Rayleigh principle. See, we have lambda 1 is the greatest eigenvalue. So we know that there is an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1. Let y be an eigenvector corresponding to, then y is equal to y1, y2, etc., yn be an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1. Then we know that y not equal to 0, and the Rayleigh quotient of y is equal to lambda 1. Therefore, lambda 1 is equal to y transpose ay by y transpose y. This is by Rayleigh principle, Rayleigh quotient. Lambda 1 is equal to the Rayleigh quotient. That also we have proved that if y is an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1, if and only if the Rayleigh quotient coincides with the eigenvalue. So lambda 1 is equal to y transpose ay by y transpose y. See, we define a new vector. We define x is equal to x1, x2, etc., xn, where xi is equal to modulus of yi. Therefore, clearly x is non-negative because x consists of all modulus values of yi's. Now we have lambda 1 is equal to y transpose ay by y transpose y. And all the entries of x are modulus of yi's. So this is less than or equal to x transpose ax by x transpose x. In fact, y transpose y is the same as x transpose x, because y transpose y is sigma yi square, and x transpose x is also sigma yi square, sigma xi square, and xi square is equal to modulus yi square, that is sigma yi square. And this is a Rayleigh quotient, x transpose ax by x transpose x. See, this is a Rayleigh quotient, and so this is less than or equal to lambda 1, because lambda 1 is the maximum among the Rayleigh quotients. So clear? See, we take y as an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1. So the Rayleigh quotient corresponding to y is lambda 1 itself. So y1 is equal to y transpose ay by y transpose y. Now x is a newly defined vector with xi is equal to modulus of yi. So this is strictly less than or equal to x transpose ax by x transpose x. So because in this there may be negative contributions, we don't know why the entries of y may contain negative zeros, something etc. like that. So if there are negative entries, then the contribution will be less than or equal to the positive contribution. So this is less than or equal to this, but this is the Rayleigh quotient of x, and lambda 1 is the supremum among Rayleigh quotients. So this Rayleigh quotient is less than or equal to lambda 1, but we begin with lambda 1, that is less than or equal to lambda 1. So that means all these inequalities are equalities. Therefore, lambda 1 is equal to x transpose ax by x transpose x. So this shows that x is also an eigenvector of lambda 1, where x is non-negative. But we just proved that a non-negative vector is an eigenvector corresponding to the maximum eigenvalue lambda 1, or any eigenvalue lambda, then x is strictly positive. Therefore, x is strictly positive. So that is the first part of the Perrin-Frobenius theorem. Corresponding to the maximum eigenvalue lambda 1, there is a strictly positive eigenvector associated with that. And the second part show that lambda 1 is simple. For that, it is sufficient to show that, say, all the eigenvalues of G are lambda 1 greater than or equal to lambda 2 greater than or equal to, etc. See, to show that lambda 1 is simple, it is sufficient to show that lambda 1 not equal to lambda 2. Now we have, in the first part, we proved that lambda 1 has an eigenvector which is strictly positive. So let x is equal to x1, x2, etc., xn be the strictly positive eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1. Therefore, xi greater than 0 for all I. And let z be an eigenvector. Suppose z is equal to z1, z2, etc., zn be an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 2. Then we know that since Rn has an orthogonal basis consisting of eigenvectors, these x and z are orthogonal. The entries in capital X are all positive numbers, and x is orthogonal to z, so that x into z equal to 0. Therefore, z should contain both positive and negative entries. Z should contain both positive and negative entries. We define a new vector y is equal to y1, y2, etc. yn, such that ya is equal to modulus of zi. Now, by Rayleigh quotient, lambda 2 is equal to z transpose az by z transpose z. That is less than or equal to y transpose ay by y transpose y. Because the entries in y are modulus values of z. So z transpose az by z transpose z is less than or equal to y transpose y by y transpose ay by y transpose y. And this is a and this y is an element. This y is an element of Rn. So this is the Rayleigh quotient of y, and among these Rayleigh quotient, the maximum is lambda 1. So this Rayleigh quotient is less than or equal to lambda 1. Now we want to show that lambda 2 and lambda 1 are different. Okay. Suppose then there are two cases. Suppose y is never 0. This no entry of yi is 0. Now we know that z has both positive and negative entries. Right? Z, since it is orthogonal to x, has both positive and negative entries. So this z vector has both positive and negative entries. Therefore, there should exist some zi less than 0 and some zj greater than 0, so that vi adjacent to vj. So why it is so? There should be some zi less than 0 and some zj greater than 0 for which vi adjacent to vj. Otherwise, what happens is the adjacency, the edges are obtained within all those vertices with the zi less than 0 and within those vertices with zj greater than 0. So edges are between these edges, these type vertices only. If there are no edges with an zi less than 0 and zj greater than 0, then all edges are those edges joining vertices corresponding to zi less than zeros and vertices corresponding to zj's greater than zeros. I hope that it is clear. If there is no such edge, with an zi less than 0 and zj greater than 0, if there is no edge vi vj with the entry corresponding to vi zi less than 0 and the entry corresponding to vj zj greater than 0, or the entries corresponding to the end vertices are of opposite signs, then what happens is all edges are those edges joining vertices corresponding to z's are less than zeros or those vertices with zj's greater than zeros. But the problem is then the graph is disconnected. Those vertices corresponding to zi less than 0 forms one component, and those vertices with corresponding zj greater than 0 forms a different component, so that the graph cannot be connected. Therefore, there should exist some zi less than 0 and some zj greater than 0, so that zi, the vertices vi adjacent to vj. So an edge contribution in this part, in here, an edge contribution is obtained, is given, or is fortified with an zi less than 0 and zj greater than 0, so that the corresponding product in the first term, in the first Rayleigh quotient, is negative. That means there are negative contributions in the first Rayleigh quotient, whereas there are only positive contributions in the first Rayleigh quotient. So this inequality must be strict an inequality. So if y is never 0, then this inequality is strict, so that there will be negative contribution in the first Rayleigh quotient, and there are only positive contributions in the second Rayleigh quotient, because all entries of y's are positive. So the inequality is strict means lambda 2, which is less than or equal to Z transpose A Z by Z transpose Z, which is strictly less than Y transpose AY by Y transpose Y. This is less than or equal to lambda 1, showing that lambda 2 is strictly less than lambda 1. So if no entries of Y is 0, then lambda 2 is less than lambda 1. And the second possibility is some entries of Y is 0. If some entries of Y equal to 0, we already proved that such a vector cannot be an eigenvector corresponding to an eigenvalue. No entry equal to 0, because this is a positive vector. This is a positive vector. This Y is a non-negative vector. If this is to be an eigenvector of an eigenvalue, it should be strictly positive. So if some entries of Y equal to 0, then this cannot be an eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1. So this inequality is strict. Then also lambda 2 less than lambda 1. Therefore lambda 1 is simple. Lambda 1 is simple. And to prove the third part, for any eigenvalue lambda, modulus of lambda less than or equal to lambda 1. See, let lambda be any other eigenvalue. If the W is equal to W1, W2, etc., Wn as an eigenvector. And let Yi is equal to modulus of Wi. Therefore, lambda, since W is an eigenvector corresponding to lambda, lambda is equal to omega transpose W transpose AW by W transpose W. Therefore, modulus of lambda is equal to modulus of this, modulus of W transpose W by W transpose W. This is less than or equal to Y transpose AY by Y transpose Y. And this is a Rayleigh quotient, and lambda 1 is the supremum. This is less than or equal to lambda 1, showing that modulus of lambda 1 less than or equal to lambda 1. And this is the celebrated Perrin-Frobenius theorem. And using this Perrin-Frobenius theorem, we can also prove, we can characterize bipartite graphs. The simple application of Perrin-Frobenius theorem and Rayleigh principle. A connected graph G is bipartite if and only if lambda n equal to minus lambda 1. So we have already proved that a graph is bipartite if and only if the spectrum is symmetric with respect to 0. So now we have reduced the criterion for characterization. You just simply look upon the greatest and smallest eigenvalue. If they are negatives of each other, then the graph is bipartite. You need not even look for any other eigenvalues. Whatever be the other eigenvalues, you can show that the graph is bipartite. See, this is a simple application of Rayleigh principle, and I'm skipping that off. And let me conclude. And these are some open problems. Even though spectrum of graphs have been examined in detail, and spectrum of several classes of graphs, several operations on graphs, the usual unary and binary operations on graphs, the spectrum of all such operations have been computed. Still, we have only a limited classes of graphs whose spectrum is known. So to find the spectrum of a graph itself is an open problem, and you have to develop several techniques to find the spectrum of graph. And another one is the largest eigenvalue of non-regular graphs. For a regular graph, regularity is the largest eigenvalue. So you ask this question to non-regular classes of graphs. What can be the largest eigenvalue of a non-regular graph? Can we find a result similar to the Hoffman polynomial theorem in case of non-regular graphs? So these questions can be asked. Or what is the largest eigenvalue of a graph having a particular property P? So suppose the graph is Eulerian. How this property of Eulerian get reflected into the largest eigenvalue of that graph? Graph is Hamiltonian. But can we say anything about the largest eigenvalue depending upon the Hamiltonianicity of this graph? If the graph has certain cut vertices, how the largest eigenvalue get reflected? And another aspect of the problem is you remove vertices from the graph. See, how can you compare the largest eigenvalue of a graph G and the vertex deleted subgraphs G minus V? Another advanced problem along this line is, can we reconstruct the spectrum of the graphs? Can we construct the spectrum of graphs from the spectrum of the vertex deleted subgraphs? See, this is a century-long problem posed by Alan Schenck and Godsell McKay et al. Similar to the Ulam-Kelly conjecture in graph theory. Ulam-Kelly conjecture in graph theory is, can we construct the graph from the vertex deleted subgraphs? The same question can be asked here also. Can we construct the spectrum of the graph from the vertex deleted subgraphs? Or how the spectral property of the graph get reflected in the spectrum of the vertex deleted subgraphs is a problem. Another problem is, can we have non-isomorphic graphs with the same spectrum? And the answer is yes. And that opened the class of graphs called cospectral graphs. Two graphs are said to be cospectral if they have identical spectrum but non-isomorphic. In fact, isomorphic graphs have the same spectrum. And in the first paper, with the first mathematical paper by Sinkowitz and Collatz in 1957, it was believed that, see, when the spectrum of graphs comes into picture through the works of Huckel in 1940s, it was believed that graphs having the same spectrum are isomorphic. And they believed that non-isomorphic graphs have different spectrum. And in the first mathematical paper regarding spectra of graphs in 1957 by Sinkowitz and Collatz, they proved that there are non-isomorphic graphs with identical spectrum, so that the spectrum of a graph cannot be taken as an invariant. There may be different graphs, non-isomorphic graphs with the same spectrum. So then now the question is, say, a parallel question of that, which graphs are then determined by the spectrum? We know that all graphs cannot be determined by the spectrum because there are non-isomorphic graphs with the same spectrum. So this is an interesting area of research in graph theory. Which graphs are determined by the spectrum? So suppose the spectrum of a graph is given. How can you prove that all graphs with the same spectrum are isomorphic to G? If you can prove that, we say the graph G is determined by the spectrum. Otherwise, not. And we can make this question more loose by asking, can you find the classes of graphs having a given spectrum? Can we find a non-isomorphic classes of graphs having the same spectrum? And cospectral graphs, and these are the main references. An introduction to the theory of graph spectra by Chetovic, algebraic graph theory by Godsell, eigenspaces of graphs by Chetovic, Rawlinson, and Simic, and plenty of research papers available in several repositories. And I hope that I could able to cover at least a major part which is beneficial for researchers who initiate their research in spectral graph theory. And there are many more areas to be covered. And let me stop my lecture, my talk here. And I request all of you, those who are interested in spectral graph theory, to read more and collect information and work on them, develop it, and make it a fruitful work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the informative talk. Next, we move on to the interactive section where in your questions will be addressed one by one.
Any questions? If you have questions or queries, you can type in the chat box so that I can address it.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Sir, can you please go for page number 39 in your slide? Sir,
Page number 30, 39.
Yes, sir.
Let me take it.
Yes, sir.
Thirty-eight or 39. This is this one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, in this, when you are giving proof, you have took it xi be the largest. You have taken some
Yes, yes, yes.
eigenvector. Xi is the largest
Largest entry.
component in the. Yes, sir. But how do we know xi is a non-zero component? If suppose all the components may be less than or equal to zero, in that zero may be maximum among them.
See, if all entries are less than or equal to 0, you take the negative of that, so that that is a positive.
Oh, maximum of modulus value of xi.
No, you,
Right,
you
sir?
need not take modulus. If the eigenvector has all its entries less than 0,
Okay.
then you take negative of that.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay. That's all, sir. Thank you.
That is also an eigenvector, and so that you can argue with it similarly.
Okay, sir.
Any further any questions? Any further questions? So if you have questions, you can type in chat box also. Then I think there are no further questions.
Now I invite Professor Asanu Agustin, Assistant Professor of Marine College, Kuttikanam, and Research Scholar of Marthoma College, Tiruvalla, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Respected Principal, Dr. Verghese Matthew, Head of the Department, Professor Minnie Thomas, respected resource person, Dr. G. Indulal, and dear participants. A very good afternoon, everyone. The strongest of all feelings is the expression of gratitude. It's my pleasant privilege to thank you all. I would like to thank Dr. Verghese Matthew, Principal of the college, who is the key motivator, guide, and leader to organize this lecture series. Thank you, sir. Now, I thank Professor Minnie Thomas, beloved head of the Department of Mathematics, for her valuable guidance, support, and presence. Thank you, ma'am. So far, we have been listening a scholar with profound knowledge and understanding. Your sharing is indeed an asset not only to researchers but also to academicians of all walks of mathematics. On behalf of all the participants and organizers, I express sincere gratitude to Dr. G. Indulal for being the resource person for this research-oriented lecture series. Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear teachers, faculty, research scholars, and students in and outside the college for your active participation. Thank you, participants, and thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. We now come to the end of this day's program. I once again thank for your patience and cooperation. Thank you all.
Okay, the link for the feedback and e-certificate is available in the chat box. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.